Drifting is actually a form of racing, form of motorsport rather. It's the act of sliding around a corner rather than being gripped up going through it. And furthermore, there are like power slides, which aren't really drifting, and donuts, which is kind of the start of drifting. In my opinion, drifting is really sliding around a corner and being able to transition, which is basically change from doing, let's say, a left turn into a right turn. And so I think once you are connecting those turns and you're continuing a slide throughout, so you're never straightening the car out or gripping up the rear tires, that is truly drifting. In my opinion, drifting is the funnest way around a corner. It is not the fastest way. Certain corners and certain scenarios, a drift will be faster, such as in rally, but generally being gripped up and breaking into the corner and accelerating out is going to be faster than a drift. So we're not going to go too deep on the history of drifting, but we are going to talk about where it really gained its popularity. So it really gained its popularity in Japan in the toge. So the toge is those really cool twisting back and forth mountain roads. Basically old Japanese dudes, well, they're old now, but at that time they're probably around our age. They're taking their AE86s and just going down the mountains, basically racing, but kind of pulling that handbrake and sliding around the corners. And that really developed and evolved over the years into what we have now with these crazy high horsepower, purpose-built drift cars. But it really did gain all its popularity in Japan, as well as all the option videos and magazines and the VHSs that were kind of flooding through the world, and people were like, what, this is outrageous. They're just going sideways and throwing smoke off the tires. I think we can thank the Japanese for really putting the sport on blast. And then I would give a lot of credit to like Formula Drift and some of the bigger series that have really taken it to the mainstream. Their large competition formats, bringing in big sponsors and crowds, basically bringing in a lot more money to the sport.
How does drifting actually work?
So how does drifting actually work? So again, we're in a slide here. So in some way, there's multiple ways to initiate the slide, but what you're gonna do is you're gonna use the way the car is set up and using the throttle as well as the steering. It's not letting the slide out and it coming back in. You're actually letting the slide out and then you're controlling that slide through the corner, and then you're able to transfer into the next corner. You can actually drift down straights. It's called manjing or chokadori. You're basically just sliding back and forth down a straight. So in theory, it is possible to drift pretty much any road and the entire track.
How do I drift?
So how do you drift? We have a whole How to Drift series where we kind of talk about the basics as well as advanced. The mechanics are fairly simple. You're either going to use your handbrake, clutch kick, or just like a power over or a feint entry, which is using the vehicle weight or the power of the car to initiate that slide. Once you've initiated it, you're basically controlling it. So you're getting back on throttle, you're using the steering angle, whatever steering angle you have available to maintain that slide. So the more steering angle you have, let's say you have a modified steering angle system such as Part Shop Max or WiseFab, or even just a modded steering knuckle, you're going to be able to maintain a higher angle drift.
How can I get into drifting?
So how can you get into drifting? Looking at it and maybe having no motorsports experience, that's exactly how I was back in the day. It can be kind of scary and really confusing. We've tried to make it simple with our How to Drift series. We actually have a video on cheat mods for drift cars, so I definitely check those videos out. That's going to give you a lot of great information. For this video, I would say do your research first. That's super important. I didn't do a lot of it and I ended up making a lot of mistakes, so we've tried to create content to kind of help you guys avoid those mistakes. Think about doing it, really getting out on the track first. I would say that's my most important thing I would give. My biggest advice is don't overbuild your car. Don't spend so much time creating this complicated car where you don't get any track time. The most important mod and the biggest mod is you, the driver. So the driver mod. Getting that track experience. A more experienced driver with a less built car is going to be better set up for the future than a low experienced driver with a really nice car. So I'd focus on you, focus on getting on the track, getting that experience, talking to some of the local competition guys, or if you can get access to a pro, ask him, get some help. Ask me. We're always available. Drop comments below, email us, DM us on Instagram. Try to answer every question. I love helping you guys out. I had a little bit of access to some help early on, but I wish it would have been nice to have more, so I'm really trying to give back to you guys for supporting us. So seriously, feel free to hit me up anytime.
Drift cars versus race cars.
So drift cars versus race cars. The title of the video is Drifting is Not Racing. It really isn't. It's a form of motorsport, my favorite. Drift cars and race cars have a lot of similarities, but there are some key differences. I would say one of the biggest ones is the suspension. So a race car, if you're looking for peak grip, you're really trying to be able to corner as fast as you can, brake as hard as you can, accelerate as hard as you can. We do want a lot of those same things, but we're looking for a really high rate of steering angle. So we completely modify the front suspension. It's totally different than how a race car would be built. We're trying to get the maximum steering lock we can get, which is basically how far your wheels will turn. That allows you to do a higher angle of drift and maintain that drift. You can drift past steering lock. It's really not the best way to do it. More steering lock, pretty much the better. We're also looking for parallel. So if you have that inner wheel dragging, sometimes that can be nice. It can kind of slow you down, but if you have them totally parallel, you're able to maintain higher speed at a higher angle. I would say steering angle is definitely one of the biggest ones. We also are looking for a lot of grip though. The rear end is kind of set up more like a drag car than a race car. So when we're in that drift, we're looking to be able to get on throttle and really accelerate in that drift. Our cars aren't set up super loose. That's kind of a common misconception. We actually did some of the top drifting myths. You can check that out. That was one of the biggest ones, is you talk to random people and they're like, oh, you just want to, set up like you're driving on ice. Even as a beginner, I would really not recommend that. Try to get some grip out of your car. Grip is a very important aspect for drifting.
How races work.
So we're gonna do a little comparison contrast of traditional racing and drifting. So traditional racing, there's all different forms, right? But generally, it's you're trying to get first place. So there's a finish line, a set amount of laps, or maybe if it's a drag race, you're just going from start to finish in a straight line. But you really are, it's the first person to finish the race successfully is the winner. Fairly simple. Drifting, on the other hand, it's not a race at all. It is a form of motorsport. It is serious. So when I say drifting is not racing, I'm not saying it's not a serious motorsport, but it's not a race. They have done some drift races, but generally the format that's really came to be kind of worldwide is the bracket format, the kind of the top 16 or even top 32 format. You start out, you do 2 qualifying laps. The judges are judging on line, angle, and style. So line, they have a set portion of the track laid out with clipping points and different areas where they want you to set the car and either drag the rear bumper or get the nose close on a certain clipping point. And they're judging you on how well you do that, as well as how kind of quickly and efficiently you get through that line. Angle, they want to see a high rate of angle. They don't want to see such a high rate of angle where it's slowing the car down, so they want to see you maintain that vehicle speed, but really more angle the better. And then style is really the toughest one to judge, I think. It's really about how you kind of put everything together, how the car looks going around. It's not actually like what the car looks like the body kit and things like that. Style is super important for us over at Haugen Racing. We love it, but it really doesn't matter with judging. Style, they're looking at kind of your style of drift and how you put that line and angle and the speed all together. So they're judging you over that. Out of that 100 points, you get to do 2 non-consecutive runs, and then that puts a bracket together where basically the number 1 qualifier goes against the number 32, and so on and so forth, and you just battle your way through. And so the lead driver, the higher qualifying driver, is trying to do that 100-point qualifying run. He's really not worried about the guy behind him. He's trying to put down the best run, a chaseable run, which is super important. He's not trying to get away from the guy. The chase driver isn't caring about qualifying run at this point. They're just trying to copy the lead driver exactly and be as close as possible. So we're not trying to hit each other. You're not passing. That's really not a thing. It happens sometimes. There's certain scenarios where a pass is okay. Like let's say it's a corner where you can really get offline and you're nearly off track. There would be a good opportunity to pass, and if you pass the lead driver successfully, they're going to get a 0 on their run. But that really doesn't happen all that much. You're not looking to pass them. You really are looking to stay right in that pocket, as we like to call it, and be as close as possible. The same angle as them, even if they're doing low angle, just copying them and being as close as possible. And out of those 2 runs, basically the lead leading first, with the chase chasing, then you switch. Now the chase is the lead. There comes a winner all the way up to the first place finisher. So the last really key aspect of drifting, and what really brings a lot of us into the sport and what keeps us here, the personality that you get to put through it and the style. So drifting, at least right now, is a motorsport where you can use pretty much whatever chassis you want. Certain series, they won't allow different modifications or using front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive cars, but generally you can kind of use whatever you want. And especially if you're not competing, you can make anything a drift car. And so that really allows a level of expression that a lot of motorsports don't have. So if you take NASCAR, they can do different liveries and things like that, but the cars are very sanctioned. There's, there'd be a certain length, certain horsepower level, certain engine. They're all very, very similar. Whereas drift cars, you can use anything from a inline 4 to a V12, turbo, twin turbo, supercharger, nitrous. It really makes it fun, and it makes it a way where you can have a lot of self-expression in the sport. The other cool thing is there's a lot of different ways to do the actual drift. Whereas in racing, generally, there's one way to get the fastest way around the track. Drifting, a lot of times there can be many ways you can still get like the perfect drift for that corner, but it can look different and be executed in different ways, which allows you to kind of create your own way of drifting. And I think that's really cool, and that's really what's kept me in the sport and really made me fall in love with it. So I think if you're someone who maybe comes from like an action sports background, or you've been into snowboarding, wakeboarding, skateboarding, it's judged a little closer to those type of sports, and there really is a lot more of that self-expression and that style and design that really comes into it and makes it super fun. And it's not just about the driving. It's about having a cool looking car, just getting that really sweet drift, or doing that corner in a really specific way. It's just super fun. If you haven't tried it, at least go ride along in a car. Hopefully someday you get to do it yourself. So I hope this was informative for you guys, maybe inspired some of you to get out there and drift yourselves. Please check out some of our other videos. Leave us some comments. We'd really appreciate your subscription. We're trying to build this channel up. This is full-time for us. If you don't know and you're new to this channel, we do 3 uploads a week. We do drifting, off-roading, builds, as well as automotive parody.